Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Ellen Gettinger coming to you from JCC Association. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this webinar. We are happy to welcome our presenter, Daniel Bonner from Keshet for an hour of learning. JCC Association is pleased to announce a newly formed partnership with Keshet. This partnership will not only give JCCs more access to information about programs and content that Keshet provides, but it helps strengthen our Jewish community by showing a commitment to being welcoming and open to all. A couple of notes before we begin. Please move your coffee, water, Diet Cokes away from the keyboard. You might be asked to type in some questions and answers. You'll be muted by the system, but please don't put the phone call on hold because we might be able to hear your hold music. Before we get started and I turn the controls over to Daniel, I want to make sure you're comfortable with the dashboard on your screen. On the right, you will see an area where you can type in answers to ask questions. When our presenter asks a question, there's a raise your hand button that can allow you to be counted or called on by the presenter. At the end of the webinar, there will be a brief survey that pops up on your screen when you log off the webinar. Please take a few moments to fill out the survey and give us your feedback. Don't forget to check out our schedule of upcoming webinars. All of our webinars can be found on the calendar at jcca.org. Many have been recorded and archived on jcca.me. And now I would like to turn it over to Daniel.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that everybody can be here. So can we switch slides actually? To the next one? Yes, actually, one more. Yeah, perfect. So hi everyone, my name is Daniel Boehner. I'm the National Manager of Education and Training with Keshet. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I identify as a cisgender gay man. So I work with Jewish organizations around the country. Particularly, I've been working with a lot of JCCs since my time here at Keshet on making sure they're more LGBTQ inclusive. So I'm really excited to moderate this panel today. I think kind of given the wake of the election, and we've seen the uptick, unfortunate uptick, devastating uptick in hate crimes and people just generally feeling unsafe. I think this in general is a particularly timely conversation to have and to really think about the ways in which our community centers can be inclusive places for everybody, but particularly for marginalized communities that might face new curtailing of their rights or generally just feel unsafe. So I think it is a very timely conversation we'll have today. And so we are joined by a team panel of JCCA professionals who have done LGBTQ inclusion work throughout their careers in JCCs. And so I want to take this time to introduce them, and then we'll go start our panel. So Lynn Davis is the outgoing Director of Arts and Culture at the Tucson JCC, and is currently the Executive Director of Sonoran Glass School. Let's see, Randy Reed originally hails from Oregon, but studied art and theater at Webster Conservatory in St. Louis. She first fell in love with working with teens at Independent Lake Camp in Pennsylvania in the summer of 2006, and ever since has been hooked on the fast-paced, creative, and exciting environment that direct service work has to offer. Randy has always been passionate about equality and community, and even worked with Glisten and her performance troupe to advocate for LGBTQ rights. In New York City, she volunteered closely with the center, NYC's LGBTQ Community Center. Since moving to the Bay Area, Randy has worked with the JCC of San Francisco and the PJCC, and spent time at the beautiful Camp Tawanga in Yosemite. Randy is thrilled to combine her love of working directly with teens and the LGBTQ community. And we also have Hallie Cohen. Hallie Cohen has been building gender and sexuality inclusive communities for almost 20 years. She recently stepped down as director of GLOW, the Kurlander program for GLBTQ outreach and education engagement at the DC JCC after 6.5 years, and creating and running over 400 programs to connect LGBTQ Jews. So apologize, I got the title wrong on the slide in front of you. She is also co-chair and co-creator of 1822, a global network for change, the next chapter of LGBTQ Jewish life, Schusterman Foundation program, which gathered LGBTQ Jewish leaders from around the world, representing 22 countries. Currently, Hallie is based in DC and works as an independent consultant in LGBTQ and engagement issues, empowering others to build their own sustainable, inclusive communities. And last but not least, we have Karen Blank. Karen is currently on the JCC Shiva faculty and is consulting with JCCs across the country, primarily in the area of early childhood, but also in the areas of mission-based programming for families and children. Karen served as the Chief Program Officer at the JCC in Denver, Colorado for the last 15 years, where she supervised all the program departments and led an effort to think about what it means to be a welcoming and inclusive place for members of the LGBTQ community of Denver. Karen enjoys thinking in systematic ways with organizations about how to develop meaningful and enduring relationships with and among people in an effort to create lifelong Jewish connections. So thank you, panelists. And now I just want to briefly have each of, keep it on that slide previously, yes. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists one by one. They can introduce themselves a little bit more informally, just generally talk about the work around LGBTQ inclusion they've done, and then we'll hop into questions. So let's start with Randy.
Okay, hello. So I'm at the JCCSF in San Francisco, and I run two basically teen programs. I run the Jewish Culture Club programs in local high schools, but I also run our LGBTQ plus teen program called the Q. And the Q is an inclusive outside of school program that is available for all Bay Area teens. I've expanded it to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, depending on the student and where they're at, their maturity level's at, and what type of support they need. We do all sorts of different programs outside the school around Jewish holidays. A lot of our programs are Jewish themes or have Jewish values to them, but everyone is included. And I pull a lot of teens from the performing arts high schools and teens from the South Bay. So our programs here at the JCCSF are focused on teens. And in this last year, we've had a lot of programs focusing on our LGBTQ community that I've been pushing more and more, trying to get us into the community and give an outlet to LGBTQ plus families and give outlets to young adults and people looking for more of a community and less of like a bar scene per se. So that's what I do at the JCCSF.
Great, thank you. So Karen.
Hi. Thank you. As Daniel said, I worked at the JCC where I started an LGBTQ task force, represented staff and local community members so that we could really think about what we needed to do and change at the JCC before we even began to think about programming. And when Keshet left Denver, there was really nobody who took the lead, and so we were really fortunate to be able to do that at the JCC for a while and convene the other organizations to do the same, join us in some LGBTQ community programming. And now that I'm no longer at the JCC in Denver, some of the work that I'm doing in a few JCCs is centered around how they can do similar work. And I'm a big believer that you have to look inwards before you can think about inviting anybody in to really understand what it means to be welcoming, how do we welcome. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be a part of this panel and hope that, as Daniel said, now more than ever, JCCs are thinking about how to do this in their organizations.
Thanks. And so how about Haley?
Hi. So thank you, Daniel. The GLOW is has been going on for about 10 years now, which is very exciting. And when it began, was the only full-time LGBTQ program at any JCC. And so in my run as director there, for about 6.5 years. Part of the work was around programming and in connecting LGBTQ Jews around the greater DC area, but also to be a resource for other Jewish communal organizations and other JCCs, because to give you a little bit of background about me, my way into this was as an activist, as an artist, as an academic. And my Jewish identity has been very much around the Jewish commitment to social justice and to the arts and to words and to all of these things. And so to be able to create programming that really wasn't about the religious aspect of it, and to say your queer Jewish identity is just as valid if Your identity doesn't involve any of the other more religious or spiritual traditions. And so that looked like a whole bunch of other things, creating around 40 plus programs a year, things like that. Because really what it came down to was really knowing that if you don't see yourself represented in a space, then you don't show up. And so we were just trying to get a few more people showing up.
Thanks. And last but not least, Lynn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lynn Davis. I am outgoing Arts and Culture Director at the Tucson J. And Daniel, I'd like to thank you for creating this opportunity, you and Keshet, because this is already wonderful. I've learned so much. Our experience in Tucson has been slightly different in that for the last 15 years or so, it's been our federation who has taken the lead on LGBT programming and inclusion. So what was once the LGBT Inclusion Project of Southern Arizona, LGBT Inclusion Project of the Jewish Federation, which then became Federation Pride very briefly and is now J Pride, has just in the last couple months moved over to the JCC. And I'd like to give a shout out to Emily Mallon, who has taken over that piece of programming, I believe is on the webinar. And so it's in a period of transition, and it's in a place where I think lay leadership of J Pride needs to learn and figure out what the JCC's resources will mean for that piece of programming, as differs from Federation resources in the past. The way that relationship has looked over the last 15 or so years is that what was then the Inclusion Project was very involved in helping program LGBT-themed programming in the Tucson International Jewish Film Festival. Our film festival has a long-standing commitment to including LGBT-themed programming and will continue to do so, and I'm curious to see how that works now that J Pride is in-house. But we have always involved folks from Federation Pride in programming, in promotion, in being part of that. So that's sort of that's what LGBT programming has looked like to date. It's happened mostly through the film festival and also through other community-wide programming that we have collaborated on and then brought in other local agencies or institutions or departments such as Arizona Center for Judaic Studies, the LGBT office on campus, Gender and Women's Studies, to do things like bring Masha Gessen, to bring speakers who are Jewish and LGBTQ and have a message for the greater community. So I think we've done a really good job of promoting LGBT individuals as experts in their fields for the greater Tucson community, which I'm really, really proud of. There's one other piece to this that is escaping me, so if it comes up later, I will mention it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So as we start the panel, so for participants, we're going to go through a series of questions that the panelists will share their experiences. There will be some time for a few questions at the end. So we'll do the panel for about 30 minutes before we switch over. So panelists, if you could just kind of share as you feel comfortable, as you feel it's relevant. But a number of you kind of started sharing some of the successful programs that you've done. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about either a number of programs or if there's one or two that really come to mind that were really successful, either program or policy change or culture change, whatever kind of fits. That was particularly successful, and what were some of the steps to ensure that success? So any panelists want to take the first one?
I'll jump in.
Go for it. Thanks.
One of the things that I did last year, I've been in this position for a little over a year here at the JCCSF, and last year, I noticed that the JCCSF wasn't represented in San Francisco Gay Pride, and I wanted to change that. I wanted to make sure that we were out with our community. We weren't just inside the walls of the JCC, and we were out with our, our city. And so Pride last year, I made sure that we had a number of different programs that catered to all age groups. So I made sure that we had a Pride prom for teenagers, and I had a very successful Pride prom for anyone in high school, anyone that had recently graduated high school, and gave them an outlet to celebrate Pride in their way, because a lot of these teens are not 21. They can't get into bars, they can't get into parties, and that's when a lot of things happen around Pride, is a big party scene. So this gave them their celebration, and they gave them an outlet to be proud of who they are and be, you know, with like-minded individuals. I had a lot of different teenagers, gay, straight, trans, non-binary, all across the board, and they were so excited to have something specifically for them. For the rest of the community, we did a Pride Shabbat. Every Friday we have Shabbat in our atrium, and this one was a little bit bigger. We had, at the JCCSF, we tend to have community gatherings where we have specific cocktails and really fun atmosphere, and a learning component with our Shabbats, or our community gatherings. And so we did that, but it was Pride themed, and we taught our community about, you know, the pink triangle and why that's significant to our LGBTQ plus community. So we have these components of community gathering, fun, engagement, but also learning. And then to finish out the month of June, we all participated and marched in the Pride Parade, but we didn't do it small. We did it as big as possible and engaged with local Jewish communities as well. So everyone was invited to march together and not be separated. I kind of try to break down as many barriers and walls, and I don't play turf wars, so everyone's included. And it was a really, really great way that we got a lot of new community members interested and engaged when they started seeing the Pride shirts walking around the JCC, and started to see the JCC's banners out on TV, or the pictures popping up on Facebook, and everyone was just getting more and more excited, because being seen, they realized that we were offering more to the community than they had noticed. So it was a big way for us to come out to our community and say, this is what we have available, and it's slowly growing.
Thanks.
Okay.
I can offer a success story and a cautionary tale at the same time. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the film festival has a long-standing tradition of including LGBT-themed films within the festival. And I would say probably 8 or more years ago, festival leadership at the time created what they called the Fabulous Fagala Film Series. And they got as many as 5 films, and they were shown all on one day. Usually the closings, like we would have closing night, but then the last Sunday of our festival would be this standalone series. It would be off campus. It was at a community art house theater, because folks believed, prevailing wisdom was that maybe Tucson's LGBT community wasn't comfortable coming to the J, didn't quite feel welcomed, so we would put these films, you know, brand them certainly as ours, but put these films someplace where people were accustomed to frequenting and to visiting. And that was great. They were, you know, we got a good crowd. We usually got a few hundred people over the course of the day. This all went well. A couple years ago, we made the decision to not show those as standalone events, but rather to roll those films into the rest of festival programming, because it was the committee's belief that these films have a message for everyone, and we didn't want them to be our special little snowflakes. We wanted the entire audience exposed to them, and we also wanted to celebrate the fact that, you know, our Jewish LGBT community is part and parcel of the greater Jewish community, and we didn't want to segregate it, for lack of a better word, didn't want it to be a standalone thing. And that's been great as well. The thing that did emerge, though, was that when the name Fabulous Fagala was chosen, it was chosen in this, so the folks thought, or the people who argued for it, argued that Fagala had been co-opted much the way queer had been co-opted in, you know, the greater vernacular, and that it would be embraced, that it wasn't offensive, that, you know, if you're not familiar, Fagala is Yiddish, it's little bird, but it was pejorative, and for many still is. After sort of taking the pulse of both our committee and our community again, we found out that there really were Jews, gay and straight, of a certain age, for whom the term was really still not acceptable. and we have since dropped it. So we no longer had that it was, you know, it was the bad word that they had grown up with, it was a pejorative that had been used against them, and that it was still a piece of language that carried a lot of baggage and was potentially harmful and painful. And so we've dropped the Fabulous Fagula, we've dropped the series, and instead have just continued to incorporate those films as part of the Greater Film Festival programming.
Thanks. Yeah, language is really important and really complicated. Thanks.
Indeed.
Any other successful programs you folks want to share?
Sure. I think, and that's so funny that you bring up the word talking about language use and thinking. So we, GLOW, one of the most recent programs in terms of low barrier events and trying to get people in, we had a sort of newcomers type event called Fagulas and Bagulas. A brunch that was around getting people together and really capitalizing on the groups from Pride and things like that. And people were often fine with the word Fagula, but over and over, of course, we have conversations around the word queer, and it's not as much a matter of there are different, anyway, whatever. This is probably going to come up later, but in terms of within the community and in terms of age differences and things like that, and when you're really trying to aim for successful programs, what's really your marker of success? Is it within a certain age group, and really thinking about those language choices when you're planning your programming? And so one of the things that we focused on is really the language changes depending on who we want to bring in. And because obviously one size doesn't fit all, we know that doesn't work. And so when people are saying, well, we can get the sort of young cis gay men to come in, and that's they're ready to show up, and they're fun and they're wonderful, and I am so happy that they are there. But also, you know, people are like, well, how do we get other people to show up? And really that's around those successes have been around really targeting specific events, and while you're throughout the course of a whole year trying to get the full community, not trying to get everybody at one event. And so part of where that's come in is with GLOW starting a series for GLOW Youth and Family. As one of the trends that happens is that after people have kids, they often report that they no longer feel a connection to their LGBTQ community, because if that was entirely around socializing in a certain way at night, and that's no longer available to you, how do we connect people still? And so really aiming things around what does it mean when your family looks different, and bringing people in that way. The other really focused area is really with a lot of the social justice programming. And for example, taking a holiday like Sukkot and the idea of temporary dwellings and using that within our queer Jewish context, and taking that to say, okay, so what does that mean for us? And for us in DC, there is an enormous issue with LGBTQ youth homelessness. And so then bringing in people who are really excited about being involved in Jewish social justice and applying that towards queer youth homelessness for Sukkot. And so I think that taking those things and really being aware of these intersecting social identities around race, around gender, around all of these different things is really when you can see that shift that is going to allow you to engage more people.
Great, thank you. And Karen, do you have any successful programs you'd like to share?
Well, you know, I was thinking that we really just launched this initiative just over a year ago at the JCC in Denver, and while we did some successful programming, I thought it was maybe worth sharing that part of why we didn't jump into programming was because we decided to engage in a very organic process with a lot of important stakeholders, and I actually think that we would never have been successful in some of our programming if we hadn't have done that. And I think as JCCs think about this. It's really important to think who are the people that you can bring together to make the work more meaningful and make sure that you're understanding what the need is in the community. And we also did really important work like in training all different groups of staff at the JCC, and we rewrote our inclusivity statement, and we changed policies and some things in our camps. So all of that, I think, was really critical, and the programming wouldn't have been nearly as meaningful if we hadn't have been very thoughtful about taking those first steps.
Yeah, no, I thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really important message to end this kind of question on, is doing the programming, getting and engaging with queer LGBTQ individuals is really important, but making sure you do the work exactly like you're saying, of the internal work to make sure your policies are in line, that you have the culture, that your frontline staff is trained, because if your frontline staff members that are responsible for taking membership applications, if let's say a non-binary person came in and the first interaction they had was a really awful gender policing, not sure what pronouns to use, kind of really not great first touch point, they're not going to want to engage for the rest of any other programming you're going to do. So yeah, I think that internal work is really important as well. Great, thank you all for those really powerful examples. So my next question then is, and maybe some of you are thinking about this right now, especially given the context of the election, but what were some of the challenges that you faced in moving this work forward, and how did you overcome them, or maybe you didn't? Anyone have an example they'd like to share?
Sure. I think one of the ongoing challenges really is because you have so much theoretical buy-in anyway from many of our communities, where people are thinking like, great, let's have all the queers over. It'll be fun. It'll be fabulous. We'll do all this thing. It's not a problem. I think the bigger issue is really in convincing folks that there still is more work to do, that this still is necessary, that this isn't like, okay, check, we're done. You could the special focused programming or initiatives or work within policies within organizations, that all of those things are still necessary, that's not finished. And so I think when you can mobilize the well-meaning folks, that's really when when you can push past a lot of the other challenges that have come up. And so specifically, when GLOW started back in 2006, the world looked very different from throughout much of its program history. And I think there were times years ago when, you know, when we would have one or two programs around either trans content or subjects or issues a year, and people would be like, what's going on with all this trans stuff? And I think now we significantly more programming around trans and gender expansive folks happens, and there's certainly not that reaction. What's a little bit nerve-wracking now is what happens with the results of the current election. What role do we want to play in the community now when a lot of the acceptance can't be taken for granted? And I think that some of those steps along the way have been really going back to the people who, first of all, are going to be most affected. Within the community, we've had a lot of straight allies come in and say, you know, how come you're not doing this type of education program? How come you're not doing X, Y, and Z? And with limited resources, my response always had to be, my first responsibility is to make sure that our LGBTQ Jewish community is taken care of and is safe and is that we can do all the things that we want to do with this program. And that's really one of the challenges that is ongoing. When how do you balance the needs of one community when revolution doesn't happen in a vacuum, and you need when you need all of our straight and cis allies to make these changes happen, and so that's ongoing.
Thanks. Definitely.
I'm going to be very curious to see how this conversation goes forward at the Tucson JCC in a post-election world. Tucson is often called a little blue dot in a very red state, and I have to hand it to J-Pride, Federation Pride leadership over the last decade and a half in that they've been very organic in their approach. You can tell by the name that it started as an inclusion project. It started as people looking to find more inclusion for LGBT Jews in synagogues, in our local Jewish institutions. And after about 10 years or so, they decided that that wasn't necessarily what their need was, what the focus needed to be, and they switched to more holidays, celebrations, simchas, seders, etc. And then that has sort of phased out as well, and they've moved toward offering LGBT-themed programming that speaks to the greater community. And I think that will be an important piece to show that Tucson's Jewish community voice, has a seat at the table as part of whatever the larger conversation might be. And I think, too, we've been looking at opportunities to partner with organizations that were serving LGBT youth in a way that we don't, or just to work on homeless issues, or to work on, to check off other boxes that we haven't been able to do by ourselves. And I think, like Hallie says, it's going to be, I was having this conversation with a friend just yesterday, it's time to break down some of those walls. I know we all want to protect our little piece of the pie, but I think together we are so much stronger, and the partnerships, the collaborations that we can make with other groups, entities, agencies, what have you, the stronger we are. So I'm just very curious to watch, to see what happens.
Definitely. Thanks.
I kind of want to piggyback on that. That's one of the things that I do here in San Francisco is I'm always looking for community partners, whether it's a Jewish organization or a non-Jewish organization. All of my business cards, and I have postcards that I hand out to teens that are promoting my programs and telling them what's happening, they all have the tagline, "You don't have to be Jewish to participate," because we are here for the entire community and we are all inclusive. And it's a really good reminder, because a lot of the times they hear Jewish Community Center and they go, "Oh, that's not me, I can't participate." And that's not what we're here for. We're here for everyone. So when I'm reaching out to different organizations within San Francisco, PFLAG is a really great organization to reach out to and give them space to have meetings at your JCC, or give them space to partner on a picnic, a program for families. That is something I've been working on, and it's a nice way to connect our organizations together. So partnering, I do a lot of partnering with Keshet in many of the programs that I do here at the JCC with either teens and or adults. Our Arts and Ideas programs, where we have different speakers come in or performances, if there's any type of LGBTQ connection, I'm partnering within my organization to make a bigger program or tack on a program to that event. And that has been really, really successful. The hardest part was, and still is, just making sure that people know that these programs are available to everyone in our community. You don't have to be Jewish to participate, and that's just a matter of having those conversations and just making sure people know. So that's what I found as a challenge, and teenagers are always hard to get a full commitment until the very last minute. That's always a challenge, but it's something that you can see happening, and we're slowly changing.
Thanks. Any other thoughts on some challenges that you might have faced? No? I know a challenge that I think a lot of JCCs that I work with over the course of my time here at Keshet that they really aren't sure how to proceed on is policy changes, particularly around locker rooms and bathrooms. We do have some examples of really strong policy changes that were made that I'm happy to share if you email me. But one particular example I just want to highlight it just to, again, show the power that you can have, particularly in the current context we're in right now, the North Carolina Asheville JCC, shortly after North Carolina passed HB2, prohibiting basically invalidating all protections again for LGBTQ citizens in the state of North Carolina, invalidating the bathroom laws and whatnot. Really devastating, painful legal battle. But the JCC in Asheville, it kind of in response or partially as a way to remedy or do their part, we worked with them on changing their policies, and once they did, and they became known in the community that they made this change, they actually were approached by outside organizations that had nothing to do with the Jewish community, that were just LGBTQ community places, groups looking for sites to do their programs, and they ended up partnering with the JCC in Asheville because their policy changes made it known that they were a safe place for transgender non-conforming folks. So that's just something that even in the context of a particularly challenging state environment or local environment, you could be that oasis of safety and inclusion for people. And I don't think, especially now, that we can underestimate that at the moment. So kind of similarly to the challenges you might have overcome, I think something else that people are nervous about are those inevitable, really hard conversations that might come up with individuals within the community that might have certain interpretations, or certain beliefs regarding Jewish tradition. What does Jewish values say about inclusion around gender and sexuality? So I'm curious if anybody has had to handle those kinds of tricky interactions, those harder conversations. How did they go, and maybe what did you use to bring them into the fold or get buy-in from folks?
You know, in Denver, fortunately, I have maybe one experience with that was challenging like that, but we decided to be very proactive with regard to that and sent a letter out to all of the families whose children were enrolled in any program for the summer, where we shared our new inclusion statement, and we talked about exactly what you said, what does Judaism teach us about welcoming and inclusivity, and we let families know who makes up our community, so that we were kind of trying to preemptively avoid that and say, don't even have the conversation with us. It's not a topic of conversation because this is who we are, this is who we welcome, this is who you'll see in our programs, period. And we found that we had just the opposite response, which was people thanking us and being grateful that they were part of a community that really embraced welcoming and inclusivity as values.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really important that that you name that, and more often than not, the responses you get are actually thank you and gratitude rather than anger. Any other hard conversations or pushback that folks have had to deal with?
Yeah, well, and I think it's funny that you it was sort of phrased as coming in from around the community, but so many of the challenges that I face are really from within the community, and if you think Jews have a lot of opinions, just fold in the LGBTQ aspect of that too, and there is people have lots of feelings about things. People have many feelings, and they want to tell you about them. So and I think that it makes sense, because when you have multiple communities here where you're used to being pushed out by sort of the dominant vision of what the community looks like, people have a right to be sensitive, and one of the big issues here is trust. How do you get people to trust you and to know that you're really working on their behalf? And some of that has to do with just the one-on-one networking and connection that we all know is so vital. But also, I think that's meant really looking at who you're bringing in, at these different policies, and sitting down with the people who have some of these issues. One of the bigger issues, we had one of our very dedicated committee members who had lots of concerns, and so I think some of that is just to be expected. Just because someone's upset doesn't mean we have to scrap things. And I've seen people who are who just want to do the right thing. And so sort of at the first moment of any sort of pushback that, for example, now that there weren't enough cis lesbian voices involved in a particular panel that was coming up, and because of many different things that had happened, there had been people there, and then things moved around, and we all know what happens when you're organizing things, and sometimes these things just happen, and so to one of the hardest pieces, I think, is really balancing all those things. And so one of the ways that we've approached that is having really a ready list of our program archive, which is still available on the GLOW website, both as a resource for other organizations looking for programming, but also to be able to point to things and say, yes, your issue is valid, and look, we're actually dealing with it. Here are all the other ways that we've talked about this thing already, because I think people are protective of these things that they care about, and we're very lucky to have people who are so engaged that they want to bring us all of these issues. And Daniel, like you were saying before, a lot of it is people anticipate a lot more pushback than ever usually shows up, and I think that's really a positive thing, because usually the way that you'll hear it is, oh, it's fine with me, but I'm just concerned about, you know, either the parents or the board members, and the board members will tell you, well, I'm not concerned about me, but I'm concerned about these people, and I think that in similar to this election, it's when you're really putting forward things like all gender bathroom policies and things like that, we had some surprises from staff members who were deeply uncomfortable with it. And I think when we were able to frame it in terms of, first of all, the real world impact on trans and gender nonconforming people, and frame it within Jewish values, that was really the way of moving forward on a lot of these issues.
Definitely. I think that piece of Jewish values is really important. Any other thoughts folks want to add? No? All right, well, my last question before we turn it over to the participants to the audience to see if there's any questions. I'm curious if there's maybe something that you wish you knew before you started doing this work of inclusion. A piece of advice you wish you knew, a piece of information, kind of anything that you feel like somebody just starting out or who's not sure where to start, that you could relay to them now that you wish you knew at the beginning.
One of the things that I've found so valuable and so amazing is the training that Keshet does in inclusion. We brought Keshet trainers in to our summer camp staff and talked about, you know, gender identity and inclusion and what that means to kids especially. And we had a lot of our staff members just kind of like their eyes opened. They're like, oh, I didn't realize. Not because they were being vindictive, but they were just never really taught that with inclusion, about pronouns and kind of how to handle different situations. And I find every time I go to a Keshet training or I lead something from a Keshet training, it's so valuable that then they have a lot of their resources online, and it's something that utilize the Keshet website. It's valuable for Jewish educators, and it's just valuable for anyone because they have a lot of great information. Planned Parenthood also has a really great website about gender identity, inclusion, LGBTQ+, and there are really great resources out there to continue to learn. I learned working with teenagers, they're always changing, and they're teaching me things about the LGBTQ community that I was like, oh, didn't know that. Okay, good to know. And having those open and honest conversations with them and within the community in a safe space, I find to be very valuable. So go with that.
Thank you, and thanks for the sweet words you have about Keshet.
Oh, you know, I love Keshet.
And if you want to talk more about trainings, I'll talk more about that at the end. So any other pieces of nuggets of wisdom for folks just about that are about to embark on this or continue their progress?
Yeah, I would add, and some people have sort of touched on this a little bit, but one of the reasons I was very excited about J Pride coming to the J and not just being, you know, a partnership with another agency is that I think it's going to afford the Tucson J the opportunity to look inward a little bit and to do some self-examination and to take the pulse of staff and membership and sort of figure out where we need to start with this conversation. I think there are plenty of us who, you know, are just want to jump in and are thrilled to have this opportunity and change everything and embrace everything and be wonderful and amazing all over the place. But I think it's important to you know, evaluate where we are and where we need to go and what needs to be addressed. And, you know, whether it's bathrooms, whether it, I mean, it came up very recently, we adopted new software, and for the membership intake, there is a male, there is a female, and it's a mandatory field. You know, and that, I mean, that alone was an opportunity to talk to staff about, you know, what do you do? There you are at the front desk and this is your, you know, first interaction with a new member. What are you going to do with that? Because it may come up, you know, it's not going to come up weekly, daily, but it may come up. And so I think just, you know, you may not get everyone on the same page, but at least you'll get a sense of where people are and what work you need to do.
Yeah, great point. Oh, Karen, you're not on microphone.
Okay, better.
There you go. Yep.
I think that because we're talking about JCCs here, I think that for this work to be successful, while it's quite likely that you need one champion, at least one person in an organization who's going to be the person to lead this kind of an effort, I think it's critical to have as much buy-in from the staff and the board as possible. So, you know, we were really careful to make sure that we were letting the board know all about along the way when we were changing our policies, or we would rewrite the inclusivity statement, that they knew, and that's why we did so many different staff trainings. And it's just so, I guess I can't stress that enough, that there's buy-in and that you bring as many people to the table as possible, internally and for sure externally. You know, as Randy said, partnering with other organizations really just helps boost your credibility in the community, I think.
So I have 2 points on this, actually. So one's more serious, one's less serious. First, I wish I knew that the capacity for forgiveness that people have. I think when you're starting, you are so nervous about making a mistake, about saying the wrong word, about trying the wrong thing, about all of these different things. And if you turn it around, you know when someone's talking to you if they're trying to be insulting or if they mean well and they just accidentally said the wrong thing. And I think when you're starting, just to have that sense that trying with the right intentions matters for something. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing all the research to make sure that, you know, all of these other pieces, but there's a community there. And there's always more of a community who is so willing to, who wants good things to happen. And so whatever fear you have, hopefully you can take that and know that maybe you don't need to have that much fear about it, because the fact that you want to do this and you're taking steps to do this is so important. The other thing that I wish that I knew was that this is supposed to be fun. There are so many parts about this that are vital parts of this conversation that have to do with inclusion and serious issues. But the other thing is that there are so many fun things that can be happening here, and also, if it doesn't seem fun, people aren't going to show up, whether that's being attracted to your organization as staff, as you know, partnering with you as another organization, or as attendees to programs. And I think some of that is really looking at where are people already showing up, you know, and And if you're having trouble attracting people, what do people already want to do? If it doesn't seem like it's going to be fun for you, that like it's probably not going to seem fun to other people. And so one of the ways that we were going about that and taking ourselves a little bit less seriously is swag. Everybody loves swag, and going around with things that that also help pull people into your program. For Pride, again, mobilizing this, the Jewish community marches together and having, I heart nice Jewish boys, nice Jewish girls, nice Jewish queers, which allows people to pick whatever t-shirt they want. And then there are all of these, pictures going around everywhere, and we have more people who are being pulled in and want to support us either as attendees or as allies. We have, selling out of things like our I Schwitz glitter buttons. All of those things that when you can communicate that no, we're having fun here. Yes, it is so important, and it is holy work to bring people together and to bring people to connect to the Jewish community in this way. But also, people should have an amazing time while in that connection, and so not forgetting the fun part is pretty important.
I want to jump on that as well. Yeah. I love my job. I absolutely adore the teens that I get to connect with, the teens that I take on Shabbatons, the teens that I have, open mics with, and these teens that are so happy and feel so safe in this space that they can talk to me and chat with me. And one of the fun things is, I say I'm never going to grow up, but talking with my organization, talking with my JCC, my marketing department, saying, this is what I need to attract my teenagers, or having more rainbows in the building just makes it feel a little bit safer for the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm going to show you by my business cards when I mean like I'm having a lot of fun. I don't know if you can see them. So you have a rainbow business card, one, and then all the contact information on the back, but it's a really great, there it is. They're a really great icebreaker. And they're a lot of fun because I get to say, hey, can I show you my really amazing business card? And then we start talking about the inclusion at the JCC, and not necessarily outing someone and saying, oh, I think you're gay, I want you to come to my program. Just like, oh, I really want to show you my awesome business card and what I do. And that creates a safe space for everyone. And I think it's just a little bit easier for them to ask questions and so on, versus like, hey, I think, can we talk about some gay programs? And it's an uncomfortable question. But when you approach it with excitement and love and you're excited about the programs, they are 10 times more likely to show up. And that's what I've discovered.
Great, thank you. So I think we're getting close to time, and so I want to transition to give folks time to ask questions. So if you have some questions, you can start typing them into chat, but I do want to invite my colleague Justin Rosensmollen, who's Keshet's National Director of Youth Programs, to talk really briefly about a really exciting program that maybe some of your teens and young people would be interested in. So Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you really quickly to talk about the Shabbaton.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Hi everyone, really nice to see some of you and to be on this call with all of you. Thank you so much, Daniel. As Daniel said, I'm Justin Rosensmollen. I'm Keshet's National Director of Youth Programs. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I sit in New York. We do some amazing things at Keshet, and I really love what I get to do, and that is steer our work with teens and with educators, helping communities and youth-serving institutions across the country become more inclusive and inviting and affirming of LGBTQ young people in their communities. In addition to trainings with team leaders and educators, a big part of my work is overseeing our 2 LGBTQ and allied teen Shabbatonim. These have been going on since 2012 on the East Coast, and last year we launched this on the West Coast as well. And so I just wanted to let you know that registration for these events is now open. We're very proud that JCCA is a proud co-sponsor of the Shabbaton. And Randy, actually, if I could just single you out for just a moment, brought a fabulous contingent of 8 teens from the JCC of San Francisco to last year's Shabbaton, and she's looking forward to doing so again, as are we. And these are just incredibly teen-led and crafted weekends where LGBTQ and ally young people can come together and explore the intersections between being queer and being an ally and being Jewish, build community and hold space with one another, really try out their facilitation and their leadership and project management skills in crafting and executing the event, and just making friends and developing these connections around the country. The East Coast Shabbaton will be March 3rd to 5th. We already have 42 registrants, and we have space for just under 80. And so we're already halfway to a wait list. We just opened up registration 2 weeks ago. It's incredible. And we still have a number of spaces available at that Shabbaton as well as the West Coast. So you can go to keshetonline.org/teen Shabbaton and find out more. But please just spread the word to your teens and to your other colleagues who work with teens at different institutions. We would really love to see a diverse showing of teens from across the country at these events, and especially interested in building up our base on the West Coast. So that's just a little bit more from me, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at justin@keshetonline.org. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Justin. So I want to turn it over to see if there's any questions. So if anybody wants to chat questions into the chat box, or I'm not sure if we have the hand raise feature if anybody wants to raise their hand, but we have a couple minutes for 1 or 2 questions. Folks to chat into the box. But actually, while folks are typing into the box, if we can switch to the next slide. Yeah, so while folks are typing in their questions, if there are any, I just wanted to direct you to some additional resources that Keshet can provide for you. So this right in front of you is the Keshet Resource Library that Randy mentioned. If you go to keshetonline.org, you'll see the resources tab on our homepage that you can click on. But this database has almost 600 different entries in it that run the gamut of LGBTQ inclusion resources, from activities and educational tools to Devar Torah to tech study to rituals. It runs the gambit. Some of the things in here are some of the ideas mentioned by the panel. So for example, if you're looking to send out a letter to your community about inclusion, we have examples of that. The 7 Jewish Values poster for inclusion, we have that in a resource library. Example policies, example statements of inclusion. So all that's there, so please feel free to use it. It's free and open to use without charge. We just ask you credit the source. If you need help finding anything, email me at daniel@keshetonline.org. But I did want to point you to that. And if you're interested in some training for staff, that's something you can email me as well. So do we have any questions?
Oh, come on. There's got to be questions.
Well, did such a wonderful job explaining the work that you do.
I guess, so I guess if there's no questions,
yeah.
Nobody has any. So I just want to thank Daniel for giving us some really great things to think about. This is the second in our series of webinars with Keshet. Please visit keshetonline.org for more information on inclusion, blog posts, link to holiday guides, and more. You can check out jcca.org for a complete list of upcoming training opportunities. And if there's anyone at your JCC who you think could benefit from today's program or any of our past webinars, you can direct them to our Directorate of Webinars at jcca.me. And if you have any questions about our webinar series, you can contact me at egettinger, that's EGETTINGER at jcca.org, or Joy Brand Richardson at joy@jcca.org. And thank you so much for participating today.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and thank you so much for our panelists. I really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you for the opportunity.